The Georgia sky burned orange and pink as dusk settled over Savannah, casting long shadows across the Grayson estate. A grand old mansion perched on the edge of town, its ivy-clad columns and glowing windows whispering tales of wealth and power too big for most folks to touch. Mia Carter stepped out of the catering van, her sneakers crunching against the gravel drive, the humid air sticking to her skin like a second shirt. At 24, she was no stranger to the grind. Raised by adoptive parents who scraped by an appealing apartment, she'd been balancing waitressing jobs since her teens, her hands rough from years of trays and late nights. Tonight's gig was just another paycheck, serving cocktails and smiles to the South's high rollers at a gala she'd never dream of crashing as a guest. She tugged her black apron tight, muttering under her breath, "Head down, cash out, go home," as the sweet scent of magnolias tangled with the low rumble of limos pulling up the marble-lined drive. Inside, the mansion hit her like a fever dream. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, tossing light across a ballroom packed with Savannah's elite, CEOs in sharp tuxes, politicians with practiced grins, and women draped in gowns that cost more than Mia's rent for a year. A jazz band crooned soft and slow in the corner, their notes weaving through the clink of glasses and the hum of moneyed voices. Victor Grayson, the man who owned it all, stood near the grand staircase, tall, silver-haired, his tailored suit crisp as a blade, his cold eyes sweeping the room like a king counting his court. Mia grabbed a silver tray of champagne flutes from the service table, her dark ponytail bouncing as she wove through the crowd, dodging elbows and fake smiles, her focus locked on keeping the drinks steady. The head butler, Mr. Hargrove, a wiry man, with a voice like gravel and a glare that could curdle milk, had laid down the law when she arrived. "No talking to guests, no wandering eyes on your work. Do it right, and you'll leave with your pay." She nodded quick, clutching the tray a little tighter as she moved, the weight of his words sinking in. But the mansion had a pull, a strange, heavy vibe that tugged at her gut, like it was watching her back. Halfway through the night, a guest waved her off toward the kitchen for more hors d'oeuvres, and she took a wrong turn, slipping past a velvet rope into a dim, oak-paneled hallway branching off the main floor. The chatter faded behind her, replaced by the soft creak of old wood underfoot and the faint hum of antique lamps casting golden pools on the walls. Portraits lined the corridor, stern men in stiff collars, elegant women with pinned-up hair, all Graysons, no doubt, their painted eyes tracking her every step. She knew she shouldn't be here. Hargrove's rules rang loud in her head, but something pulled her deeper, a flicker of curiosity sharper than fear. Then she stopped cold, her breath snagging in her chest. There, tucked between two looming oil paintings, hung a small photo in a silver frame. A faded snapshot of a little girl, maybe 4 years old, standing in a sunlit sandbox. Her hazel eyes sparkled wide, her gap-toothed grin lit up the frame, a tiny scar on her chin glinting like a badge from a tumble Mia could still feel in her bones. The tray wobbled in her hands, a flute tipping with a soft clink. Her heart slammed against her ribs. That girl was her. Mia staggered back a step, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. She blinked hard, half expecting the photo to vanish, but it stayed. Real, solid, undeniable. The yellow sundress, the sandbox, the curls bouncing around her cheeks. It was a memory she'd buried, a snapshot her adoptive mom, Ruth, had kept in a dusty scrapbook from before Mia knew who she was. But how? How could it be here, framed on the wall of Victor Grayson's mansion, a place she'd never set foot in until tonight? Her hands trembled, the tray tilting dangerously as her mind raced. Someone in this house knew her past, and they'd hung it up like a trophy or a taunt. Footsteps echoed from the ballroom, sharp and quick. She snapped out of her daze, darting back toward the crowd, her pulse pounding in her ears. She slid into her role again, passing out drinks with a forced smile. But the photo clung to her like a shadow, its questions louder than the jazz. Who put it there? Why? And what did Victor Grayson, a man who could buy silence with a flick of his wrist, have to do with a girl like her? This Savannah night's cracking open a mystery, folks. One photo's about to turn Mia's world upside down, and you won't believe where it leads. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell right now, 'cause this story's got twists that'll hook you hard. Stick with me, America, 'cause Mia's just getting started. The Grayson Estates ballroom buzzed like a hive as Mia Carter moved through the crowd, her silver tray of champagne flutes glinting under the chandelier's glow. But her mind was miles away, stuck in that dim hallway where she'd seen her own childhood face staring back from a silver frame. The image burned in her head. The yellow sundress hugging her 4-year-old self, the sandbox dirt smudged on her knees, that tiny scar on her chin from a tumble off a tricycle she could still feel in her shins. Back in the bustle of the gala, her hands moved on autopilot, passing drinks, nodding at guests, but her stomach churned, a storm of questions whipping through her. How could a photo from her past, a snapshot her adoptive mom, Ruth, had tucked away in a scrapbook, end up on Victor Grayson's wall? She'd never been here before tonight, never even brushed against this world of wealth and whispers, so why was her face part of it? The jazz band's smooth notes felt mocking now, the laughter of Savannah's elite grating against her nerves. She forced a smile, but her eyes darted, scanning the room for answers, for someone who might know more than they let on. Victor Grayson stood near the staircase, his silver hair catching the light, his presence heavy as a thunderhead. Did he know about the photo? Did he put it there? Mia's grip tightened on the tray, her knuckles whitening as she dodged a guest's outstretched hand. She needed to find out, even if it meant breaking every rule Mr. Hargrove had drilled into her. No wandering, no questions, just work. During a rare lull, Mia slipped into the kitchen, a steamy chaos of clanging pots and shouted orders, where the air smelled of garlic and sweat. She spotted Agnes, the estate's cook, a wiry woman with flower-streaked arms and a voice roughened by years of cigarettes. Agnes was elbow-deep in a pile of onions, her knife flashing as she chopped with a rhythm that could outpace the jazz outside. Mia sidled up, wiping her tray with a rag to look busy. "You've been here a long time, right, Agnes?" she asked, keeping her tone light, like it was just small talk. Agnes snorted, not looking up. 30 years, give or take. Longer than these rich folks have had their shiny toys." Mia leaned closer, her voice dropping low over the hiss of a boiling pot. "The Graysons, Victor's family. What's their story? Anything strange?" Agnes paused, her knife hovering, then smirked, a glint of mischief in her tired eyes. "Strange? Honey, this house is a graveyard of secrets." Victor took the reins after his brother James and his wife went down in a car wreck. 99, nasty as hell. Word around town was it wasn't no simple skid. Folks whispered sabotage, but money's got a way of hushing things up quick in Savannah. Mia's breath caught. James and his wife, dead in a crash, just like the vague tale Ruth had told her about her birth parents. "They had a kid?" she pressed, her voice barely steady. Agnes shrugged, slicing again. "Some say so. A little girl lost in the mess. Never found her, though. Probably gone with them." Mia's heart thudded against her ribs. Could that girl be her? She nodded thanks, her mind racing as she slipped back to the ballroom, the pieces clicking too close for comfort. The next night, Mia clocked in again. Same apron, same tray. But this time, she wasn't just serving drinks. She had to see that photo again. Had to know it wasn't some trick of her tired eyes. She waited for a quiet moment. Victor distracted by a senator, the guests tipsy and loud. Then darted back to that oak-paneled hallway, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. The portraits glared down as she reached the spot, her pulse hammering in her ears. But the wall was bare. The silver frame, the photo of her younger self, it was gone, like it had never been there at all. Mia's stomach dropped, a cold sweat prickling her neck. She ran her fingers over the empty space, half expecting to feel some trace. But nothing, just smooth wood and a faint whiff of polish. Someone had taken it, someone who'd seen her snooping, who knew she'd been here. Her breath quickened. Victor? Hargrove? One of the staff? She stumbled back to the kitchen, her shift blurring by in a haze of forced calm, every clink of glass and rustle of silk now sounding like a threat. Later, in her cramped Savannah apartment, the streetlights buzzing outside, she sat across from Ruth at their wobbly table, a chipped mug of coffee steaming between them. "Mom, what do you really know about where I came from, before you took me in?" Mia asked, her voice soft but firm. Ruth's hands faltered, spilling a splash of cream as she set her mug down. "Mia, why drag that up now? They said your folks died in a crash, left you at a shelter upstate when you were 4 or 5. That's all we got, honey." Mia's chest tightened. Crash, shelter, little girl lost. It matched Agnes's story too perfectly. She stared into her coffee, the swirl of cream twisting like the secrets closing in. "This ain't just a photo anymore, folks. Mia's past is slipping out of the shadows, and someone's desperate to keep it buried." The Grayson estate loomed over Mia Carter like a storm cloud as she clocked in for another shift, her black apron tied tight over a heart that wouldn't quit racing. That photo, her photo, had vanished from the hallway wall, but it hadn't left her mind. It clung there, sharp and stubborn, a puzzle piece she couldn't ignore. The yellow sundress, the sandbox, her own gap-toothed grin. It was her at 4, no question, and someone in this mansion had ripped it down to keep her in the dark. Agnes's words from the kitchen echoed, James Grayson and his wife dead in a '99 crash, a little girl lost in the wreckage, and Ruth's shaky story matched too close. A shelter, a tragedy, a past with no edges. Mia wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a hunter now, stalking answers through the glitz and shadows of Victor Grayson's world. The ballroom glittered as always, chandeliers dripping light, jazz weaving through the air. But tonight, Mia's eyes weren't on the champagne flutes or the guests' fake smiles. They darted to the staff, the tight-lipped maids scurrying with trays, the butlers with their starched collars and stone faces, everyone a potential key to the lock she needed to break. She moved through the crowd, her tray steady, her steps deliberate. Hargrove's rules be damned, she wasn't here to play invisible. She needed someone who'd seen the Grayson family's bones, someone who'd talk. During a smoke break out back, where the humid Savannah night pressed thick against the mansion's brick walls, Mia spotted Eddie, the security vet with a limp and a face weathered like old leather. He leaned against a rusted railing, puffing a cigarette, the orange glow flaring with each drag. She sidled up, fishing a spare lighter from her apron pocket as an excuse, her voice casual but her pulse anything but. "You've been here a while, huh, Eddie?" she asked, flicking the flame to life. He grunted, exhaling a gray cloud that curled into the dark. 25 years, back when James Grayson ran this place with a laugh, not Victor's iron fist. Mia's breath hitched, but she kept her cool, leaning against the rail beside him. "James, the one who died? What went down?" Eddie's eyes narrowed, flicking toward the mansion's lit windows like he half expected Victor to be watching. "Car crash, June '99, him and his wife Lillian, out on some back road. Cops called it an accident, but folks whispered, brakes don't just fail on a clear night. They had a kid, a little girl, disappeared after. Some swore she burned up in the wreck. Others said she got spirited off. Victor took over fast. Too fast. Shut down the questions with cash and cold stares." Mia's chest tightened. Her hands itched to grab him, to scream, "That's me!" But she swallowed it, her voice steady. "Why the rush to bury it?" Eddie shrugged, stomping his cigarette into the gravel. "Graysons don't like loose ends, Victor least of all." She nodded slow, her mind spinning. A girl lost, a crash, a cover-up. It wasn't just a hunch anymore, it was a thread, and she'd pull till it unraveled. Days later, Mia tracked down Pearl, a retired maid Agnes had name-dropped, through a scribbled number from the cook's tattered address book. Pearl lived in a shotgun house on Savannah's outskirts, its sagging porch creaking under Mia's sneakers as she knocked, the air thick with lavender and the hum of cicadas. Pearl answered, a stout woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled tight in a bun, her hands dusted with flour from a pie she'd been rolling. "Heard you worked for James Grayson," Mia said, stepping inside as Pearl waved her to a worn couch, sweet tea sweating on a coaster between them. "I need to know about his family. Everything." Pearl's face softened, then froze, her gaze locking on Mia's hazel eyes like she'd seen a ghost. "Lord have mercy, you're her, ain't you? Little Mia, James and Lillian's girl. You'd chase fireflies in that garden till your mama hauled you in, giggling like a bell." Mia's breath snagged, her throat closing tight. Pearl knew her, remembered her. "What happened to me?" she whispered, leaning forward, her hands clenched on her knees. Pearl's voice dropped low, hard as steel. "Victor happened, child. That crash, June '99, took your folks, but you? You didn't die. I saw you after, bruised but breathing, till you vanished. Cops said you burned up, but I never bought it. Victor paid him off, scrubbed you clean out of the story. He wanted that empire, James's empire, and you were in the way." Mia's world tilted, the room spinning as Pearl's words sank in. Her childhood hadn't slipped away. It had been stolen, buried by Victor Grayson's greed. She stood, legs shaky, her voice barely a rasp. "He's kept this quiet all these years?" Pearl nodded, her eyes dark. "Quiet as a grave, Nithom. Till you walked back in." Mia's fire was lit now, folks. This Savannah secret's cracking wide open, and Victor's days of hiding are numbered. The Savannah air hung heavy with humidity as Mia Carter pulled into the Grayson Estates service lot, her beat-up sedan rattling to a stop under the shadow of the mansion's towering columns. Her black catering apron sat snug around her waist, but tonight it was a lie. She wasn't here to pour champagne or dodge Hargrove's glare. She was here to break into Victor Grayson's secrets. Pearl's words still scorched her mind. Victor had stolen her life, erased her from the Grayson legacy after that '99 crash, paid off cops to bury her existence, and Eddie's hints about a cover-up only fanned the flames. That missing photo from the hallway wasn't a fluke. It was a breadcrumb, and Mia was done guessing. She'd overheard a maid gossiping in the kitchen. Victor was headed to Atlanta for a day-long meeting, leaving the estate quieter than usual. This was her shot, her one crack at the truth locked somewhere in this gilded cage. She slipped through the back entrance with the other staff, her tray of cocktail napkins a flimsy shield, her pulse hammering like a drumbeat she couldn't hush. The ballroom buzzed with a smaller crowd, some charity dinner, but Mia's eyes were on the clock, waiting for the moment to move. Hargrove barked orders from the corner, his hawkish gaze sweeping the room, but even he couldn't watch every shadow. When the guests drifted to the patio for cigars and dessert, Mia seized her chance. She ditched the tray behind a potted fern and darted up the back stairs, her sneakers muffled against the creaky wood. The third floor was a maze of locked doors and dusty silence, but Pearl had dropped a gold nugget. Victor's private study held everything: his deals, his dirt, his past, and it was off-limits to everyone but him. Mia found the heavy oak door at the end of the hall, its brass knob cold under her sweaty palm. She pulled a hairpin from her ponytail, thank God for those teenage years picking locks on her brother's diary, and worked it into the keyhole, her hands trembling as the tumblers clicked. The door groaned open, spilling her into a room thick with the scent of cigar smoke and old leather. Moonlight poured through tall windows, painting silver streaks across a massive mahogany desk, cluttered with papers, and a decanter half full of bourbon. Bookshelves loomed along the walls, stuffed with leather spines, but Mia's eyes zeroed in on a crooked portrait, a stern Grayson ancestor glaring down. She slid it aside, her breath catching as a digital safe blinked back at her, its red numbers glowing like a dare. Eddie's voice flashed in her head. Victor never forgot the crash, June 15th, 1999. She punched in 0615-19989. Click. The safe's heavy door swung open with a low groan, and Mia's world shifted gears. Inside, papers spilled like secrets begging to be free, bank statements with circled payoffs, a forged death certificate listing Mia Grayson, deceased, and a yellowed envelope sealed with a wax G. Her fingers shook as she tore it open, the delicate scrawl inside hitting her like a punch. To my Mia, my darling, if you're reading this, we're gone. Your dad and I knew Victor wanted it all. The money, the name. He threatened us, tampered with our car. I saw the cut brake lines myself. If we don't make it, stay safe, hide. He can't be trusted. You're a Grayson, our heart. Lillian, your mom. Mia's knees buckled, her breath ragged as tears blurred the ink. This was her mother's voice, alive on the page, screaming the truth Victor had buried. She stuffed the letter into her bag, her hands frantic as she grabbed the forged papers and a flash drive tucked in the back. Proof, all of it, of his crimes. A floorboard creaked behind her. She froze, the air turning to ice as a shadow stretched across the room. Victor Grayson stood in the doorway, his silk tie loose, his Atlanta trip cut short by some twist of fate. His eyes glinted like a predator's, his voice slow and sharp as a blade. "Snooping, are we, Mia? I figured you'd come sniffing around eventually." She clutched the bag tight, her heart slamming against her ribs, caught red-handed, with nowhere to run. "I know what you did," she spat, her voice shaking but fierce. "You killed them, my parents, and erased me." Victor stepped closer, his smile cold as a crypt. "James was a fool, too soft for this family. You were a loose end, a nobody I made disappear. Digging this up changes nothing. You're still nothing." Mia's blood boiled, her fear burning into fire. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The clock's ticking, folks. Victor's got Mia cornered, and the truth's dangling by a thread. The air in Victor Grayson's private study turned thick as tar. As Mia Carter stood frozen, her bag stuffed with damning evidence, her mother's letter, forged death certificates, a flash drive of secrets, clutched tight against her chest. Victor loomed in the doorway, his silver hair glinting under the dim light, his voice slicing through the cigar-scented haze like a razor. "You think you can ruin me with that?" He sneered, his cold eyes locking onto the bag as he stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking slow and deliberate on the hardwood. Mia's heart pounded, her legs trembling, but she held her ground. The letter's words, Lillian's words, burning in her mind. Victor had sabotaged her parents' car, stolen her life, buried her past. "I know you killed them, James and Lillian, my parents, and hid me away like trash," she shouted, her voice cracking with fury and fear. Victor's laugh was a low, bitter rumble, his lips curling as he towered over her. "James was a weakling. Couldn't handle the Grayson name. You? Just a loose end I tied up, sent to a shelter, forgotten. You're a nobody, Mia, and no one'll believe your little papers over me." He lunged, his hand snapping toward the bag. Mia jerked back, adrenaline exploding through her veins, and bolted past him, her shoulder slamming into his arm as she darted for the door. Victor's roar shook the room. "Stop her!" His voice a thunderclap that echoed down the hall as Mia ran, her sneakers pounding the floor, the bag bouncing against her hip. The Grayson estate blurred around her. Portraits of dead ancestors flashed by, their painted eyes accusing, as she tore through the third-floor corridor, Victor's shouts rousing the mansion like a kicked hive. Heavy footsteps thumped behind her, security guards, their radios crackling with static, closing in fast. Mia's breath burned in her lungs, her mind racing. She couldn't let them catch her, couldn't let Victor bury this again. She ducked into a narrow servant's passage, the walls tight and musty, her shoulders scraping plaster as she stumbled down a rickety staircase. Shouts bounced off the wood. "She's heading downstairs!" And a guard's shadow loomed at the top, his boots clanging on the steps. Mia hit the ground floor, bursting through a side door into the humid Savannah night, the air slapping her face like a wet rag. Gravel crunched under her feet as she sprinted across the lot, the mansion's lights glaring behind her like a beast waking up. She fumbled her keys from her apron, diving into her sedan. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. Tires screeched as she peeled out, Victor's silhouette erupting in the doorway, his fists clenched, his face twisted with rage as she sped down the drive, the bag of evidence safe on the passenger seat. Her rear-view mirror showed security spilling into the lot. Too late, she was gone, the Georgia darkness swallowing her taillights as she floored it toward town, her hands shaking on the wheel, her breath ragged but alive. Mia didn't stop, couldn't stop, until she reached a rundown bar on Savannah's edge, its neon sign flickering open like a lifeline. Inside, she found Lena, a scrappy journalist with chipped nail polish and a nose for scandal, hunched over a beer at a corner booth. Mia slid in across from her, the bag thudding onto the table, her voice low and urgent. "I've got it! Proof Victor Grayson murdered my parents and covered it up. He's been lying for 25 years. Lena's eyes widened, her pen already scratching notes as Mia spilled everything: the photo, Pearl's story, the letter from Lillian, the forged papers. "This'll blow him sky high," Lena muttered, snatching the flash drive and flipping through the documents, her grin sharp as a blade. Mia slumped back, her coffee trembling in her hands. She'd made it out, but the fight wasn't over. Within 36 hours, the story hit like a hurricane. Headlines screamed across screens. Grayson Empire rocked by murder and fraud. News vans swarmed the estate, choppers buzzing overhead, stock prices crashing as Savannah woke to the scandal. Cops stormed Victor's gates, cuffing him as cameras flashed. His cold stare burned through the TV, but Mia watched from a motel room, her breath steadying for the first time in days. The letter rested on her lap, Lillian's handwriting a lifeline to a past reclaimed. Victor was down, his empire ash, but Mia's gut told her there was more, a piece still missing. Justice is rolling, folks. Mia's turned the tables, but this Savannah storm's got one last twist. The motel room's flickering TV cast a blue glow over Mia Carter's face as she sat on the edge of a lumpy bed, her hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of cold coffee, the chaos of Savannah still ringing in her ears. It had been 3 days since she'd bolted from Victor Grayson's study, 3 days since she'd handed Lena the journalist her mother's letter, the forged papers, the flash drive that cracked his empire wide open. The news had erupted like wildfire, headlines screaming, "Grayson fraud exposed," and "Murder! Cover-up rocks, Savannah elite." And Victor's smug face was plastered everywhere, cuffed and scowling, as cops dragged him from the estate. Mia's breath had steadied watching it unfold, the weight of her fight lifting just enough to let her sleep an hour here, a minute there. But her heart still ached. Lillian's letter rested in her lap, its ink smudged from her fingers tracing the words. "You're a Grayson, our heart. Lillian, your mom." She'd toppled Victor, reclaimed her name, but a piece was missing, a hole she couldn't fill. Then the TV flickered to a breaking report, and her cup slipped, splashing coffee across the stained carpet. A frail woman with graying hair and hollow cheeks stepped from a rural Georgia clinic, her wrists thin as twigs, her hazel eyes distant but achingly familiar, Mia's own eyes staring back through the screen. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking as the anchor's voice cut in. "Found alive after decades, linked to the Grayson scandal." Lillian was alive. Victor hadn't killed her, just buried her in shadows. Mia didn't pack. She grabbed her keys, the letter, and ran, her sedan tearing down Georgia backroads, dust swirling in her wake as she floored it to the clinic an hour outside Savannah. Her hands shook on the wheel, her mind a storm of hope and dread. 25 years stolen, 25 years of lies. What would be left of the woman who'd written that letter? The clinic loomed ahead, a squat brick building ringed by pines, its parking lot buzzing with news vans and gawkers. Mia shoved past them, her sneakers skidding on the tile as she burst inside, a nurse pointing her to a quiet room down the hall. She paused at the door, her breath shallow, then pushed it open. Lillian sat by a window, sunlight spilling over her fragile frame, her gray hair tangled, her hands folded in her lap. She looked worn, faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. But when Mia stepped closer, those hazel eyes lifted, foggy at first, then sharpening with a spark. "Mom?" Mia rasped, her throat tight as tears welled. Lillian's head tilted, her lips trembling as memory clawed through the haze. Victor's drugs, his lies, the years locked away. "Mia, my baby," she whispered, her voice a cracked echo of the past. Mia crossed the room in 2 strides, collapsing into her mother's arms, their sobs tangling as they held tight. 2 souls torn apart by greed, stitched back together by truth. Lillian's frail fingers brushed Mia's hair, her breath hitching. "I thought you were gone. I saw the crash. The fire. Victor said you died." Mia pulled back, tears streaking her face. "He lied. To both of us. I found you, Mom. I brought you back." The doctors filled in the gaps later. Lillian had survived the 99 wreck, pulled from the flames with burns and a shattered mind. But Victor had locked her away, pumped her full of sedatives, faked her death to seal his takeover. Mia's evidence, Lillian's letter, the flash drive, had led investigators to the clinic, cracking the last of his prison. Days later, Mia stood in a Savannah courtroom, her voice steady as she faced Victor's glare across the gallery. His silk tie swapped for an orange jumpsuit, his empire dust. She read Lillian's letter aloud, the forged papers laid bare, and watched the gavel fall. Life in prison, no parole. The Grayson fortune sat untouched. Mia didn't want it, wouldn't touch blood money. Instead, she took Lillian west, to a quiet Oregon town where pines whispered peace and the air tasted clean. They bought a small house with a porch, opened a shelter for kids like Mia once was. Lost, searching, needing a hand. One crisp morning, months later, Mia stood with Lillian on that porch, coffee steaming in their mugs as dawn painted the sky gold. Lillian squeezed her hand, her smile soft but strong. "You saved us, Mia." Mia nodded, her voice a whisper against the breeze. "We're home, Mom. Free." The fight's over, folks. Mia's won her mother back, turned Savannah's shadows into Oregon light.